She always thought she was strong until she found herself broken inside a house that looked perfect from the outside. Where laughter once lived, now there was only silence that swallowed every dream and every hope she had ever dared to whisper to herself. She remembered the first time she realized that love could hurt the way it did, that the person who promised to protect her could also be the one who made her feel invisible and small. She walked through the rooms of her home like a ghost, watching shadows move across the walls, and every word he spoke felt like chains around her heart, telling her she was not enough, that she could never escape, that she would always belong to the fear that followed her like a shadow that refused to leave. She tried to remember how life felt before the fear, before the harsh words and the quiet nights filled with tension, when even breathing felt dangerous. She remembered mornings when she woke with tears still wet on her cheeks from the night before, and wondered how anyone could see her and not notice the bruises of her spirit that no one could touch, but everyone could feel in the hollow places of her chest. She found fragments of herself that refused to die, little sparks of hope that reminded her that she was not only a victim, she was a woman with dreams and ideas, with a mind that could create and a heart that could love freely. But those sparks were small and fragile, and every time she tried to nurture them, he would find a way to snuff them out, making her doubt her worth and her power, until she started to believe that the life she dreamed of was not meant for someone like her, that freedom was a story for other people and not for the woman who stayed in the same kitchen every night, staring at walls that echoed her fears. She remembered sitting on the edge of the bed in the dark nights, when the world outside was asleep, and thinking about what it would mean to leave, to take only what she could carry, and disappear into a life that she had never known. The thought terrified her, and yet it was the only thing that made her heart beat fast with a strange excitement, as if somewhere inside her a voice was whispering that she could survive, that she could be brave enough to step into the unknown. She thought about her friends and family, and how long it had been since she had reached out, and how long it had been since anyone had noticed how she was slowly fading away, how she had learned to smile even when her soul was aching, and how every compliment she received felt like a lie. She wanted to believe that she was stronger than this, that the fear and the control could not last forever, that the world outside was bigger than the walls that held her captive, and she made a quiet promise to herself that one day she would see sunlight again, not just through the blinds, but on her own skin, without apology or shame. She remembered the nights when she planned small escapes in her mind, imagining what it would feel like to walk away, to get in her car and drive to anywhere that would not carry his voice or his anger, imagining a life where she could wake up and make choices that belonged only to her, imagining a life where she could rebuild herself brick by brick and discover the woman she had buried under years of fear and control. She remembered the first time she really felt courage in her bones. It was not loud or dramatic, it was quiet and almost invisible. She was sitting in the living room pretending to watch television when she realized that if she didn't act, she might never act again, and that every second she waited was another second she lost of her life. And in that moment, she made a decision that would change everything. She started packing, slowly at first, a bag for essentials, a few documents, a little money she had saved secretly in the depths of her closet, a notebook filled with plans and dreams, and she put them all together like pieces of a puzzle that might one day become the picture of a life she deserved. She remembered stepping out that night into the cold air, feeling the weight of everything she was leaving behind and the uncertainty of everything she was running toward. The streets were quiet, and she felt a strange exhilaration mixed with fear that made her heart race. She did not look back because she knew looking back could make her turn around, and she could not turn around. She had already promised herself freedom, and that promise was stronger than the fear that tried to pull her back. She walked into the night like a shadow, moving toward the possibility of a new life, feeling the crisp air on her face and realizing that for the first time in years, she was breathing on her own terms. She remembered the first days after leaving, how small the world felt, how fragile she felt as she slept on a friend's couch, feeling the vulnerability of being unknown and alone. But at the same time, she felt alive in a way she had not felt for years. She worked every hour she could find, cleaning offices, answering calls, delivering packages, anything that would allow her to survive. And little by little, she began to carve out space for herself, a tiny corner of freedom where she could think and plan, where she could remember the woman she had been and imagine the woman she could become. She remembered nights when she stayed awake, reading about business, about marketing, about women who had started with nothing and built empires with courage and persistence. She imagined herself among them and felt a thrill that made her want to leap into action. She began sketching ideas for products she could create, thinking about what she loved, what she knew how to do, and what she could offer to the world. She remembered how terrifying it was to take the first step, to post her first creation online, to show her work to strangers, to ask for money in exchange for her art, and how small the first sale made her feel, yet how giant the proof that she could do it was. She cried quietly that night, not for the money, but for the realization that she had been brave enough to try, that she had taken control of her life for the first time in years, and the tears washed away some of the fear that had been lodged inside her chest for too long. She remembered building slowly, day by day, improving her products, listening to her customers, learning from mistakes, and slowly discovering a rhythm that felt like hers alone. And with each small success, she began to believe more and more that she could achieve her dreams and that she deserved to achieve them, that she could be more than what her past had tried to make her feel, and that she could be a beacon of strength for others who were still trapped in the shadows of fear. And she dreamed of the day when she could tell her story, not as a tale of victimhood, but as a testament to resilience and courage, that her story could inspire other women to find their spark and step into the light. And she remembered the quiet mornings when she would sit with a cup of coffee, watching the sun rise over the city, feeling a sense of peace that had once seemed impossible, and knowing that she had done this on her own terms, that she had fought not just for survival, but for the right to be fully herself, and that in every challenge she had faced, every fear she had confronted, every night she had spent wondering if she could do it, she had found pieces of a power that no one could take away, and she held those pieces close, like treasures waiting to be shared with the world. She woke up in the soft light of morning with her notebook open and her hands aching from staying up all night sketching ideas, and she felt a strange kind of excitement that made her heart race and her mind buzz with possibilities. She began reaching out to suppliers to find materials that could bring her vision to life, and every phone call and every email felt like a battle she had to win against herself, against the fear that sometimes whispered she was not good enough or that she would fail. But she refused to listen, and she reminded herself that failure was not an enemy, it was a teacher, and every small mistake was a step closer to the woman she was becoming. She worked tirelessly, creating each product with care, pouring her heart into every detail. And sometimes she would pause, just to marvel at how far she had come, from the woman who had once been trapped and silenced in a home that tried to destroy her spirit. And when the first package arrived from a supplier, she held it in her hands, feeling the weight of possibility. And she realized that for the first time, she was building something that belonged entirely to her, something that could never be taken away by anyone else. And she began listing her products online, nervously watching as strangers browsed and clicked, and she waited for a sign that she was doing the right thing. And then it happened. A notification popped up, a small order for $27, and she held her breath, feeling a rush of emotion she could hardly contain. Tears streamed down her face, not because of the money, but because it meant she could survive, that her courage had been enough to create something real in the world. And from that moment on, she worked day and night, improving her website, refining her packaging, reaching out to customers, answering every question with care. And the small victories began to pile up, and with every positive review, her confidence grew, and she began to imagine bigger possibilities, thinking of collaborations and larger sales and new products. And she remembered the nights when she had doubted herself, the moments when fear had threatened to paralyze her, and she smiled, knowing that those nights were behind her, and she was finally living her life on her own terms. She remembered the first time a local boutique agreed to carry her products and how she felt standing in the shop, watching her creations on display, feeling a pride that she had never allowed herself to feel before. And she realized that she was no longer just surviving, she was thriving. And yet, the journey was not easy. There were setbacks that made her question everything, unexpected expenses that seemed insurmountable, and nights when she would cry herself to sleep, wondering if she had the strength to continue. And each time she reminded herself that she had already survived the worst, and this was nothing compared to the courage she had shown when she walked away from the life that tried to trap her. And she found ways to keep going, small rituals that reminded her of who she was, journaling her thoughts, walking in the early morning light, and slowly but surely she began to build not just a business, but a life that reflected her values and her dreams. And she realized that her story was bigger than just herself, that every struggle she had endured could inspire someone else to find their voice and take the first step toward freedom. And she started sharing her journey online, carefully telling pieces of her story without revealing everything, but enough to show that she had survived and was thriving. And messages started pouring in from women she had never met who felt seen and understood. And that connection fueled her even more, pushing her to work harder, to expand her brand, to reach more people, to create a product line that could support not just her, but her community. And she remembered the late nights spent learning marketing strategies, searching for trends, watching other entrepreneurs, and thinking how she could put her own unique mark on the world. And slowly, her brand began to gain recognition not just locally, but nationally. And she began to receive inquiries from larger retailers who wanted to carry her products. And she felt a nervous excitement unlike anything she had ever experienced. And with each contract signed, she felt the weight of her past lifting little by little, knowing that she was building something unshakable from the ground up. And she remembered one evening sitting alone in her apartment, looking at the skyline through the window, and realizing that she had done it. She had created a business from nothing, from fear, from a life that had tried to tell her she was nothing. And she whispered to herself a quiet thank you for the courage she had found inside, and for the persistence she had discovered when no one was watching. And she knew that this was only the beginning. There were bigger dreams to chase and more people to inspire, and she held the thought close, feeling a warmth in her chest, knowing that the woman she had once been scared and small had transformed into someone unstoppable. And she began planning new products, thinking of ways to innovate, ways to reach more people, ways to share her story. And with each plan came new excitement, new possibilities, new hope. And she remembered that her strength had not come from avoiding fear, but from facing it, from moving forward despite it, from stepping into the unknown when everything inside her had screamed, "Stay safe and small." And she began speaking at small events, sharing her journey, her voice carrying the weight of truth and experience. And she saw eyes widen and heads nod, and she realized that her story had power, that her survival had meaning, and that every woman who heard her could take courage in the knowledge that she was not alone, that they could too rise from the ashes of pain and rebuild their lives stronger than ever before. And she remembered the tears that had soaked her pillow in the first weeks after leaving that terrifying home, and she thought about how far she had come, and how those tears had been the first drops of a river that would one day carry her to unimaginable places. And she knew that even when challenges came and nights grew long and uncertain, that river of courage and resilience would never run dry. And she whispered to herself a promise to keep moving forward, to keep building, to keep inspiring. And she felt a lightness she had never known before, the kind of lightness that comes from knowing that you are finally free, that you are finally alive, that you are finally living the life you were always meant to live. This is not the end. The real story in part 2.